Thank you.
All right. All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Manhattan Green Board 3's presentation with OCM, the Office of Cannabis Management. This is not a traditional community board meeting. This is a presentation for the public and our board members. They will do the presentation and we'll take Q&A afterwards. I'm going to introduce now Pascal Bernard from OCM, who will introduce the team.
I was on mute. Happy New Year, everybody. Good evening. My name is Pascal Bernard. I'm from the Office of Cannabis Management and want to introduce my amazing teammates. We have with us Damian Fagan. He is our amazing Chief Equity Officer. We have Phil Rumsey, my partner in crime. He is Manager of Intergovernmental Outreach. And we have the last person in intergovernmental affairs, Adam. I don't see you, Adam. There you are. And I am going to try to not butcher your last name because I never, well, I'll let you come off mute so you can pronounce your last name correctly.
Adam Stoneski, Program Specialist, OCM. Happy to be here.
Thank you, Adam. I'm sensitive about my first name, so I try to be respectful. So first, want to thank everybody for being here tonight. We know that this is a real important discussion, and so we're grateful that you're here because you could have been somewhere else. And what we're going to do is we're going to run some slides. It's going to take us about a half hour, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. And we'll try to answer as many questions as we can. And you know, hopefully we'll all have a informative session tonight. So we're going to set up the slides now.
Okay. Whoever is doing slides, you should have screen sharing abilities. There you go.
Okay, fantastic. Let's do this instead. Okay, ready, Pascal?
I am, thank you. So we're the Office of Cannabis Management. And really, what is cannabis? Cannabis is really, it's a very versatile plant. And it's been used in medicine, industrial, and food purposes. And as you can see on this slide, it shows you the various ways that it's been used. It really is, in a lot of ways, a misunderstood plant. And I'm sure many of you have heard about hemp. Hemp is the same plant as adult use cannabis. It just contains 0.3% less THC, and THC is the compound that really gives you that euphoric feeling. And so they are the same plant, and a lot of people don't realize that. And so THC is not federal, it's not a federally controlled substance. So cannabis is legal here in the state, but it is still a federally controlled substance. I'm sorry, cannabis is still a federally controlled substance, THC isn't. Next slide, please. So what's legal in New York State? Adults 21 and over can buy and possess up to 3 ounces of cannabis flower, up to 24 grams of concentrated oil, tinctures, edibles, or vapes. And cannabis can be consumed in private home or state licensed on-site consumption. Currently, we don't have any on-site consumption sites licensed as of yet, but that is coming, and you'll hear more in following slides. And vaping and smoking cannabis is not allowed anywhere vaping and smoking tobacco isn't allowed. Additionally, people in public housing, again, that's federal property, and so you would not be allowed to smoke cannabis in the privacy of your home there. Next slide, please. So the MRTA, it was signed in March 31st of 2021, and we have the Office of Cannabis Management that's what the MRTA created, as well as the Cannabis Control Board. Additionally, there's a 20-member Cannabis Advisory Board. And what the MRTA did was it legalized recreational usage, cannabis, adult recreational use cannabis, and it also expanded the state's existing medical cannabis, cannabinoid hemp, and CBD program. And really, what I like to focus on is the MRTA really centered public health. And so think about the MRTA as a stool, right? The public health portion is the seat of the stool. And as you can see on this slide, it has the 3 legs: public safety, social justice, and economic development. Next slide, please. And so the Office of Cannabis Management, we oversee adult use recreational, medical cannabis, and hemp. Next slide. And so as we're talking about, as we talked about, it is a stool. And so when we look at the MRTA, there's an emphasis on social and economic justice. And immediately when the MRTA was signed into law, automatically it cleared nearly 400,000 records were expunged. 40% of the money will be invested towards rebuilding communities disproportionately impacted by the war on drugs. And the MRTA sets a goal towards 50% of adult use licenses going to social and economic equity applicants, and also developing a social and economic equity plan. Next slide. So adult use cannabis taxation. It is a weight base. So it replaces the THC per milligram, which different rates depend on products. So 0.3 milligrams of THC edibles, 3 cents per milligram on THC edibles, 5 cents on milligram per THC cannabis flowers, and 8 cents per milligram on THC concentrated. The THC tax can help push consumers to lower potency products by making higher potency products more expensive and helping achieve public health goals. 9% state excise tax on the sale of cannabis products by realtors to a cannabis consumer, 4% local excise tax rate at retail price, 25% goes to the county and 75% goes to the city. Villages and towns can establish their own revenue distribution agreements. So really what this slide is saying is that, there will be a distribution between the city and the county. So between city and Manhattan. Next slide, please.
Oops.
And so the revenue fund, all cannabis revenues will be deposited into the cannabis community grant will go towards community grant reinvestments. And so the grants will go to nonprofits and community-based organizations and communities that were disproportionately impacted by prohibition. And it will also go into drug treatment and public education. So when you think about the revenues for cannabis, the best way to think about it is 40-40-20, which you see here in this slide. So 40% for education, 40% for community grants, and 20% for drug treatment and public education. Next slide. So there are many opportunities in this emerging business. And as you can see, there are 9 different license types here on the screen. A lot of people focus on the retail dispensary. I like to call this the Beyonce license, and everybody wants that. But as you can see, there are so many opportunities with the various license types. And we really do encourage people to look at the various license types and really see what best fits for them. And so we have the retail dispensary, the on-site consumption, cultivation, nursery, processor, distributor, delivery, adult use cooperative, and micro business. Next slide, please. And so what we've done, unlike so many other states, is we created a tiered system. And this is what the tier system would look like. And we've done it this way so that no person has direct or indirect access across all the tiers. And so this also includes stock ownership. And what this does is it really creates opportunities for small to mid-size entrepreneurs to really get into the business. And as you can see, there's the supply tier, there's the retail tier, there's medical, and there's laboratory. And so really it creates a much healthier ecosystem. And we've, New York State is one of the few states that does this. And it was very purposeful on our part. Our executive director, Chris Alexander, our board chair, Tremaine Wright, whenever they speak, they talk about creating a healthy cannabis ecosystem. And this shows you exactly how we plan to do that. And so again, no person may have direct or indirect interest across the tiers. Next slide, please. So in addition to the 9 license types, there's also, ancillary businesses. And this is, again, part of creating a healthy cannabis ecosystem that our executive director and chair speaks about. And very truthfully, this is my favorite slide. So with these ancillary businesses, you do not need a license from OCM to engage in these businesses. And so we'll take, for example, if you're a realtor, all you need to do is look at our regulations, understand what the regulations are as it relates to where retail dispensaries or consumption lounges can be placed, and really turnkey your business, your existing business, to do that. If you are a tax preparer, you can, again, look at our regulations and turnkey your business to be able to prepare taxes for cannabis industry businesses. And so really, this is an opportunity for existing businesses and for existing entrepreneurs who do not want to get a license to participate in this industry and help create this healthy ecosystem that we talk about at the Office of Cannabis Management. Next slide, please. And at this, conditional, so there, in addition to the MRTA licenses, we also have conditional use licenses. And so these are standalone, it's a standalone license system. And really it was to jumpstart the cannabis industry here in New York State. And so we started with the adult use cultivator license, then we did the adult use processor license, and then we are now at the conditional adult retail dispensary license. So you have to grow it, you have to process it, and now we're at the point where we can start selling. And really that is the conditional adult use retail dispensary license. These are the licensees that will come before the community board. And so unlike the MRTA that we just talked about, it has 9 license types. And November 21st of last year, we released our proposed regs for the MRTA licenses. There was a 60-day comment period, and my colleague Phil will talk a little bit more about that in his remarks. But those regulations, the proposed regulations, are released. Next slide. So what we've done with the conditional licenses, for the conditional adult use cultivator license, about 280 with additional applications are under review. The processor license, we issued about 38 with additional applications under review. For the retail dispensary, conditional adult retail dispensary, thus far, we've issued about 36 licenses with a target goal of 175 across the state. And, these conditional adult use retail dispensary licenses will be the first retail dispensary licenses across the state. Many of you may have heard on the 29th, the first retail dispensary opened in New York City. Housing Works opened it on 8th Avenue, I believe. And so again, these are the first of its kind, and we're really, really excited about that. And to be eligible for card, you had to be an individual or eligible family member with a New York State cannabis related conviction and experience owning or operating a qualifying business. We also allowed nonprofits, as I just said, Housing Works opened the first retail dispensary. And for the Housing Works, for the nonprofit license, you had to intentionally service justice-involved people and engage in social enterprise and meeting other card requirements. Next slide, please. And now I'm going to turn it over to Phil, who will talk about our enforcement activities.
Okay, thank you, Pascal. Yeah, so I want to jump into the OCM enforcement activities here. To be clear, there is only one place where there are legal cannabis sales in New York State right now, and that's the dispensary Pascal just talked about. The illicit market is something that we have been dealing with really since the very beginning of the OCM journey. Back in October 21st of 2021, this was the second board meeting that we had, and Chair Wright and Executive Director Chris Alexander both issued statements on gifting. And to be clear, gifting is when you would go into a pizza place, a bodega, a gas station. Someone would have a pile of stickers and you would give them $80 for a sticker. And then after that, they push over some cannabis across the counter. This is illegal. We've made clear that this is illegal and is a simple misinterpretation, either intentionally or not, a misinterpretation of what's in the MRTA. This is probably the second most discussed issue that we have when we're talking with communities. We also began sending out cease and desist letters to suspected illicit retailers in January of 2022. We put out a press release kind of detailing these efforts. And we have our enforcement staff are working on a daily basis with local law enforcement, DAs to discuss this issue and come up with different ways to crack down on it right now. Our enforcement division, again, has been conducting operations and investigations since January of 2022. We are, again, in constant contact with DAs, law enforcement throughout the state. The enforcement division is continuing to staff up, and they are visiting illicit stores. They are continuing to send the cease and desist letters. Recently in New York City, working with the sheriff's office, we were able to impound 16 illicit truck dispensaries that were down there. So one of the reasons we find ourselves in this situation is that the MRTA gave the Office of Cannabis Management power over licensed entities. And as you can imagine, all with the exception of one now, any place that's selling out of a brick and mortar location are not licensed by OCM. We found ourselves with this issue. It's very similar to what the SLA has to deal with, where they have authority over licensed entities. So facing this challenge, we were using every tool that we had to crack down on these brick and mortar locations. That's using any building, zoning, or healthcare laws that are pertinent. These are the nuisance abatement issues that we would go after trucks if they're if their registration was out of date, or if they were using the truck for purposes that it wasn't intended to. And if you're doing that illegally, it clearly wasn't intended to. We were using every aspect of existing law to crack down on these locations in order to help alleviate this problem statewide, and it's certainly a statewide problem. We are working with the governor's office and the state legislative branch on some new legislation that we're hoping to put out very soon. Certainly this month is the plan. That's going to give us some additional tools to help fight this illicit market, specifically the brick and mortar stores. This will give us jurisdiction over cannabis. It will help us in our investigative efforts. And what I like to refer to as kind of an Al Capone method of cracking down on this. Al Capone went to prison for tax evasion. We're certainly not looking to put people in prison, but we are looking to crack down on these. And we've been working with tax and finance at the state level to increase the penalties, and that way truly go after the brick and mortar locations using a lot more power and financial leverage than we had before. I do want to draw everyone's attention. We have a complaints@ocm.ny.gov email. You can send if you come across a store that you think is selling illegally. You can send the information. We'll throw that in the chat as well. Send the information to the complaints email with as much information as possible, and that will trigger our enforcement team to launch an investigation and to take a closer look at that entity. Growing in New York. So currently home cultivation for recreational use is not legal in the state of New York. The MRTA sets a timeline here of 18 months after the first dispensary opens that New Yorkers 21 and up would then be allowed to grow at their home. In addition, and possibly more importantly for some people, medical cannabis patients, certified medical cannabis patients can grow as of October 5th of last year. And this will also allow caregivers 21 years or older to assist them in their growing if needed. This is an important aspect. Most states don't allow people to grow their own medicine, and we do feel that this will be a cheaper way for individuals to kind of hone in on the exact strain and kinds of cannabis that work best for their medical condition. So retail guidance. This was issued October 28th of last year. OCM released a package of regulations outlining many of the expectations for and requirements for dispensaries across the state. With those regulations, many of those regulations are still under development, but card licensees are required to follow the rules outlined in the document called Guidance for Adult Use Retail Dispensaries. If it's not already in the chat, Adam, I'm sure you can throw that in there. The Guidance for Adult Use Retail Dispensaries is a very useful document if you want to understand the different aspects and requirements that we are having our licensees follow. Let's see here. So the MRT regulations, November 21st, Pascal mentioned this of last year. Cannabis Control Board did put forth the adult use regulations. The package had different aspects to it, including the application and license selection and renewal process, key social and economic equity program provisions, environmental and sustainable standards, general business operating requirements, including security, record keeping, and transportation. Those are currently out for their 60-day comment that started December 14th of last year. and is ongoing. We can throw the regulations into the chat, but we want to hear from you. We want to hear from your members. We want to hear from the public about what we may have gotten wrong or things that you think we can do better. And that's why this regulations at ocm.ny.gov, send your comments to that email. We want to hear from the public, and we know that different people from across the state are going to have different perspectives on this. And that's only going to help us as we create this ecosystem as we go on. So the regulations email, please take a look at the regs and certainly comment if you feel there's ways we can do something better. So staffing and training, there will be an employee which is in charge. The individual has to be 21 and up. They will act as a general manager or a main point of contact for OCM at the dispensary. This is an individual who will be expected to submit any required reports and ensure that the records are kept in compliance with OCM regulations. This ensures that all dispensaries and employees are trained in accordance with the manual. Again, this will help us have a exact contact at each of these dispensaries that we know we can reach out to if there's a complaint, an emergency, a question we have. There will be a kind of a centered individual there that we can reach out to and speak to about these, and they will be fully trained. We also have a training manual. This is actually outlined in section 4 of that retail guidance document I mentioned before. It lists all the topics of areas that must be included in both the manual and actual training of employees. So advertising. So the advertising requirements are being finalized. Their business will have to comply with all the requirements. All ads, including product displays, cannot be visible outside of the store. So you have to ensure that all products in the store cannot be seen outside. This has a lot to do with our making sure that nothing is appealing to individuals 21 or under 21. Individuals cannot display giveaways, so there are no loyalty programs, no highlight menu price reductions. Retail locations with the external signage, you can have a sign outside to show where the dispensary is. It is limited to 2 for the dispensary. The sign cannot have any logo, symbol, or imagery. Can only have the name of the business, location, and contact information for the business itself. Internal side signage required customers info. It can have the basics of license hours, notifications, things like that. We do want to make it clear we learned a lot of lessons from the tobacco industry. We know what was done to entice children, and we're making sure that down to the font of the sign, that nothing overly appeals to children. And we want to make sure we don't go backwards here, that we keep the ball rolling forward and not end up in some situation like we saw with the tobacco industry. Sales and transactions. So they will need to show both the price of the product and the total price with tax on the menu. We want to make this very clear and transparent. Cannot advertise sales and giveaways, like I said. This doesn't stop individuals from changing the prices of the product, but it does limit their ability to advertise the reductions. Licensees cannot advertise giveaway, discount, price reduction, point-based reward system, or customer loyalty program, including using, the word sale or free. Again, we want to make this very transparent and very clear of what everyone's getting into. consumer transactions, there will be age verification coming through. One of the important points outlined here is that the age requirement to verify that anyone purchasing cannabis at your dispensary is 21 years and up. Guidance will include a list of acceptable forms of IDs that they can use in order to get into the store. There is a right to refuse sale. Dispensaries workers can refuse to sell cannabis products to a customer if they believe they would endanger the health or safety of the individuals. And there's a lot of customer education. This will include required voluntary education. We want to make sure that people coming into the store understand what they're getting into, what they're looking at, what they can expect, and so that there are no surprises going along with this. Finally, with delivery, there are different requirements for cannabis delivery depending on where your delivery originates from. If you have a temporary delivery location, you must follow all the requirements outlined in the delivery guidance document released by OCM. And if you're delivering to customers from a retail dispensary store, those requirements are outlined again in the retail guidance document. Let's see here. So that's our both broad and kind of very specific overview of the ecosystem that we're trying to create here. Two last things: if there are any upcoming events that you want OCM to be aware of, you can email us at events@ocm.ny.gov. That's going to allow us to, plan for these upcoming events if someone wants us to speak there or just be aware of what's going on. So feel free to use that. And if you'd like to get some updates from OCM on our website, cannabis.ny.gov, if you just scroll down a little bit, you'll see a place where you can subscribe to our listserv, and that gives board notifications, and you can select different topics that you're interested in. So please use that if that's of interest to you. And with that, I will stop sharing my screen here. And not sure if anyone else from OCM has anything they want to add or say, or
So
I'll
go ahead. Thank you for that presentation, Pascal, Phil. Great stuff. I wanted to just briefly share with you all, why I'm here and why I'll probably be going to a lot more of these over the coming months, really the next few years. We really need to hear more from the community boards in the city as we prepare for the wider rollout of the legal industry. There's going to be, hundreds of licensees, retail, delivery, all over Manhattan and the 5 boroughs. And it needs to be a conversation between our agency and local leadership. And the only way these businesses are going to be successful is if the community buys into what we're building. And so that only happens if we listen to you guys and answer your questions and take your feedback. And so this is going to be a big change for a lot of people. A lot of people who are more accustomed to this being something that's done in a back alley or in a gray market store, like there are, I'm sure, in your community right now. But this is going to be a big change. It's going to take many years for it to actually transition over to a legal market. But I'm here because we really need to get this right. And we only get it right if we work together and we listen to each other and we do this collaboratively. And so that's why I'm here. And I look forward to hearing your questions. We got
all right. So you want to take questions now, or?
Yeah, I guess you
Okay.
can moderate the Q&A for
Sure.
us.
Yes, I will. All right. So what I will do, everybody can put hands up, but I will actually call on community board members first, and then I will pivot to other members of the public. the first hand I saw was Susan's hand because that's directly to my left. So Susan, I'll lead off with you and then I'll go to board members and then I'll go to other members of the public. Go ahead, Susan.
Yeah, thanks very much. So there were a number of technical questions involving the community board process that I had sent in ahead of time. One of them was to discuss manner that the community boards are expected to comment on time, place, and manner, which when I researched that seemed to be mostly in relation to First Amendment. Could you describe a little bit how or specify what it is you expect the kinds of comments from community boards in regard to time, place, and manner? And let me just ask you a few others at the same time. On what is the specific date that comments must be in for the draft regulations that were released the 21st, and could that be put on your website? Regarding community engagement, I saw information regarding community engagement. I think it was in the draft regs, it was from your website, but I'm told that these initial license applications don't need to submit community engagement plans. Could you tell us what they are? Is community engagement, does that mean outreach to the community, or does it mean outreach to the social justice impacted people? What exactly does that mean? And I think that's enough questions for one question.
Phil, you want to get started? Time, place, and manner question?
Yeah, absolutely. So with time, place, and manner, I think you're referring to the notification to municipalities. I think that's something you can throw into the chat, Adam, if we haven't, or maybe throw it in again. We do have a notification that goes out to either the clerk of the municipality or in this case, the community board. And
we have that.
Yep. And so you're asking, I mean, are you asking what the community board can do when it comes to
your
their
regulations say that the municipalities would be involved? I forget the exact wording, but they would look at time, place, and manner, and they can make rules regarding time, place, and manner. Well, the community board is the only exception as far as making rules, but it would still be, I assume, talking about time, place, and manner. If that's not true, could you explain what we should be talking about and explain what manner means? Because when I looked up manner, it seemed to be mostly talking about form of expression.
Yeah, and I think when they were creating the MRTA, I think, in retrospect, they may have used better language than time, place, and manner. It's a little bit all over the place, right? It's you can kind of throw anything in there. What we've done in the regulations, and I'll take hours of operation, for example. So we have put in a floor of how long a dispensary can be open. And that was 70 hours. We wanted to make sure that people weren't kind of a back end opt out, making it so problematic for the dispensary to work that they were coming up with laws that made it nearly impossible for them to work. So for an example, again, that floor, that baseline of 70 hours of selling time, that doesn't include deliveries or anything like that, is kind of a baseline. Communities will be able to extend the hours if they would like to 2 a.m. And so we were given leeway there. I'm trying to show that we were trying to come up with a balance between this kind of vague time, place, and manner, and also making sure that we have a healthy ecosystem. And the hours help demonstrate that in a way where we did define some of the time, place, and manner of in the proposed regulations. That includes the hours of operation. So that's the balancing act that we're doing with that definition of time, place, and manner, and the notification process itself. As far as, I mean, if you're asking specifically, what should community boards be doing? Is that part of,
Yes, so we're hearing an application. We have a notice which gives very little information. And we have an application and we have proposed regulations that we really don't understand. For instance, the 70 hours is very clear, but it doesn't say, and I'm not saying that we want to, but it doesn't say that the hours of operation within that minimum 70 hours can be or can't be determined. And as you know, our only reference is generally SLA stuff, which theoretically they were supposed to be somewhat modeled on, but really isn't. And it's just very confusing. I'm supposed to understand it for the board. And I don't, and I really don't, particularly manner.
Yeah, I think there are it is somewhat vague and it's not as prescriptive as the SLA. The SLA, you know, the authors of the SLA and the SLA generally had played a big role in drafting the MRTA. I think that generally speaking, you know, we want to get feedback from community boards on time, place, and manner. You know, nothing prescriptive or, you know, but like we want to incorporate that feedback as best we can into and our businesses and our licensees to incorporate that feedback as best they can. So I think that, you know, we want businesses in these communities that the community actually supports, and they played a role in shaping, you know, how they interact with the communities they're operating within. And so, you know, we want our licensees want your input. Our office wants your input. I think that it's vague just because this is a very stigmatized industry at the moment, and you know, there's a significant challenge that our licensees are going to face by going first. And I want to say that specifically, we're starting with equity. We're starting with people who are arrested for cannabis, so they're going to face the most stigma operating these businesses first. That hasn't happened in other states. Usually, it's large corporations that come in and operate first, and they're better prepared to face that stigma with community liaisons, large staff, community outreach. The folks that we're going to be sending to you in a lot of cases may have never, you know, may have just had like a pawn shop or a taxi cab driver, and they don't have that, you know, experience of really, you know, diving into what's required to get approval from community boards. And so we still want the feedback. We still want the input. I think that that's important, and the MRTA captures that.
And also, I think that, excuse me, as Phil has talked about with the time, there's the 70-hour floor. But with you know, some of the questions around manner, I think with the information that we ask from the licensees, and we sent that information, you received it yesterday, you see the things that we're asking them, it gets to some of the heart of manner, and you know, it's like how they will be operating their businesses. And so that is not something, you know, I as Phil said, I think some of the language in the MRTA is purposely vague, but that is some of the pieces of manner. And so you do get that information. It's not necessarily something that is regulated per se, but we do, the licensee does share that information. And again, with the materials we sent yesterday to the community boards, it shows you just the breadth and depth of documents that we require from everybody coming before us. It is a lot of information, and we do our due diligence. We have some of the best people working on this who fact check. And actually today I spoke to one of my colleagues in that department who audits all this information. And, you know, he is in essence a forensic researcher, because he goes down a rabbit hole and checks every piece of information.
Okay, I just want to be clear what we're trying to do. What I'm trying to ask is to be able to work with you to know what it is that you're trying to find out from us. So that's the spirit of these questions.
No, I understand that, Susan.
Can you give us the due date for the—
Oh, February 12th.
February 12th. Could you put that on your website? I think it might be helpful to people.
Sure.
Yep, I
You
threw that
know-
in the chat actually.
Okay.
So on our website, that regulation website page, will take you, and it'll show you all of our proposed regulations,
Yeah,
as well
very
as the dates that they are comment period ends.
But it does, oh, okay.
There's a lot of information on our website.
really
It's hard to find
confusing.
stuff.
It
Yeah.
has like a spreadsheet or a chart, and unless you really know what you're doing, it's really hard to find the correct piece that we should be commenting
Oh,
on.
that's good
Anyway,
feedback.
thank you very much.
Well,
You
All
had a
right,
question
I'm-
about community engagement. I just wanted to answer really
Yes,
quick.
please, that would
Uh,
be great.
So the licensees that are coming in the next year, and the regulations kind of outline this, these will be licensees from all over the country. They will be social equity, they will be veterans, they will be people from communities, but they'll be everybody. And these businesses, in order to get a license, they have to submit a community impact plan. In order to operate in your community as a dispensary, they have to have some sort of plan that's measurable, impactful, that actually has a dollar, amount behind it. Like, what are you doing for the community? Are you, creating an after-school program? Are you, doing some sort of workforce development initiative with local people coming back from prison? So there has to be something impactful that the local community is benefiting from for us to even give them a license. We actually fully intend to score applicants for licensing in New York for specific licenses based on the strength of their community impact plan. So the more you commit to the community that you're trying to operate in, the higher the chance you might actually get a license. So that's what the community engagement, the community impact language I think you saw.
Thank you.
and I'm sorry, Susan, not to belabor this, just going back to the regulations, because you said there's so much, it's hard to know which one to comment on. We actually want the community to comment on everything. And I know how it sounds. I know how it sounds.
No.
But the regulations really, it's a conversation between government and constituent. And so we want it to be a rich, impactful and meaningful conversation. We wrote the regs. We think we know what we're doing, but we want to hear, as Damien has said, we want to hear from community. And so it's really important that, people look at all the regulations and provide us with comments.
Thank you.
Okay, so I have 7 hands up. I'm going to go to community board members first, and I think there's one member of the public who has their hand up. So I'm going to start with the hands that I see. I see Michelle. I'm going to allow you to talk. Go ahead.
Hi, you can hear me? Okay,
Yes.
great. Thank you all for coming tonight. Just for some background, I'm the SLA chair at CB3, so I have some experience in these types of applications, even though it's different, obviously. But I think my first question for you guys is, have you ever been to a community board SLA hearing for all of the people from the state office?
Yes.
Okay.
Pascal and I have.
Yeah, I've been to one.
We've been
Okay.
to a couple, yeah.
So depending on which boards you've been to, you might see what those types of community feedback sessions are actually like, which I think gets to Susan's question of what can the community board impact? And what do you want to hear from both the community board members and from community members? Because I try very hard to educate community members about what we find constructive to hear from them for SLA applications. And I think what is unclear here is how we can give constructive feedback and what the board will actually listen to, right? So for SLA applications, we have a series of set stipulations that we use. Must close doors when they're playing music, that sort of thing, that we ask all, and I should say this is for on-premises consumption, not for liquor stores. So I think, that's what Susan is asking. I think that's what I'm wondering. What
Yeah.
probably a lot of people are wondering is, what do you actually want to hear from us and what will be the most impactful? Because a lot of these meetings turn into venting sessions where community members are just saying, no, I don't want this. I don't want this. I don't want this. That won't be constructive, I don't think. And so I'm both, that's a warning and a question about how we can try to mitigate that.
Yeah, so I just jump in really quick. I think, when the licensee, submits a notice, the community board is entitled to send their opinion on whether or not that licensee should be granted a license in that community. And, if the community board itself, makes a strong case why this licensee should not operate a cannabis business in this community, the office and the Cannabis Control Board has to take that into consideration and, make it public record and respond to it. And I think that ultimately, what we want to communicate is that, like, if there is strong opposition from community boards, and there's a really good argument to be made that this licensee is not an appropriate fit for the community, like we will give that weight in our review process and the Cannabis Control Board when they decide to approve or deny that license application. So you do play a role. We do want that input. It's just it depends on the case that you make, either in support or against the licensee that is applying to start a business in your community.
And to emphasize one point here, we, at its core, what we're, fundamentally looking for from community boards, from municipalities, is for them to share their opinion on what they feel is most important. We don't necessarily want to, fully box someone in and say, comment on 4 things and let us know what you think. The opinion that you send will be one element that the Cannabis Control Board uses to determine whether or not a licensee can move forward. It's not the beginning and end, but it's one element that they have to weigh. So if you feel that there's significant problems with the location or the building itself, or maybe you ask for some information and the licensee refused to give it to you, those are things that we want to hear about, we want to know about. And we want you to use, in some ways, your own judgment on the best way to let us know what your opinion is on the licensee and on the location. That's going to help us, when we read the opinion that comes in, formulate how we move forward with this licensee, or their application, I should say. And again, you're sharing an opinion with us, and that's going to be one factor that the Cannabis Control Board uses to determine whether or not to move forward with. So, I would say, and I think we've, kind of been saying this and hinting at it, we want to hear what you want to tell us and what you feel are the most important issues for your community and the impact this is going to have.
Okay, thank you so much. Paul, is it okay if I ask just a follow-up to that?
Sure.
I just wanted to also note that that Community Board 3, and I don't think any community boards do not weigh in on stores, liquor stores. So the parallel here would be dispensaries. So I guess I'm curious about why it's different here, and does that not sort of suggest the stigma that Damien, you were talking about, that there's some stigma associated with selling marijuana versus selling liquor? That I guess I'm just sort of curious about what the rationale was there. Thank you so much.
The rationale there is that because we're sensitive to people's opinions about cannabis, especially at the onset of the industry. I don't think we want to bring businesses into communities that don't want them. They won't be successful. And we don't want to put our licensees at risk. There are communities that are actually very opposed to cannabis in any kind of way being in their community. And if they express those opinions, to us, and we determined that, maybe this isn't the right fit for this licensee, or the Cannabis Control Board makes that determination, we don't want to put them into an oppositional relationship with the community that they operate in. And that's not good for anybody. Maybe they can find another location. So.
And also, the state legislature was very, they really created this, the MRTA, they created this law. And so wanted to, ensure that communities had an opportunity, because as Damien said, this is an emerging industry. And because this very vital plant has been, really demonized in a lot of ways. wanted to give communities an opportunity to weigh in and provide an advisory opinion. And so that's part of it as well.
I'll add to that, you guys could have licensees come in front of you where like one licensee is from that community and one licensee is from like Texas. So like, and you would also be able to express an opinion on, whether someone from your community you think better represents the community. That kind of stuff will matter. There'll be factors that people take into consideration. And so you will see a large swath of licensees come in front of you. I mean, not like a ton of licenses. There's not a ton of businesses coming to your community. It's going to happen very slowly. You will see one at a time, probably.
All right, thank you. Next hand I see is Trevor Holland.
Hi, thank you for that presentation. It's very informative. I have a bunch of questions to ask, so I'm going to limit mine more towards the impact on the youth in my particular neighborhood. And so my first question is, and I'll stack them and I'll go a little slow, is I saw where the reinvestment was going into the community, but I didn't see a component which dealt with the education of our youth about a particular plant.
Yeah.
I saw, about daycare and other things, but our youth need to know about because there are some addictive properties to this plant, and it still can be considered a gateway drug. I know my particular community, there are dozens of what we call legal shops, although, as you mentioned, we don't know what's illegal about them because when you bust them, it's for cigarette tax sales or some other thing, but they can stay open. But I don't see that educational component because on a particular corner, there might be 15 to 20 youth who are vaping this drug and using it, not understanding that there needs to be some education about it.
Yeah.
The other question is, I'm going to stack them just to make it easier. Is this still a cash business? And I asked that question for security reasons. And I know there's a federal component to this. And if it's not a cash business, that doesn't matter. But there are a couple of places that were robbed around where I live because they deal in cash. They've hired youth to stand outside for security, and they pay them a certain amount of money for that so-called security. But people avoid that corner because we've had 4 shootings, 2 robberies, a number of assaults on that particular corner. So that cash question and the security issue, if it is a strictly cash business. The drug addiction and drug treatment and addiction, it'll be curious when a shop sets up next to a drug treatment or addiction place, because people do get addicted to cannabis. It's not, the safest thing as people think it is. It's it has addictive properties. But are you looking at whether these places are going to set up right next to addiction treatment places or places where people who are addicted or have medical issues with other drugs? And are you also looking at how many places infiltrate certain neighborhoods? In other words, if you get 5 or 6 on one block, and what might be a poor or a neighborhood of color, and is that a particular component? Yeah. And I guess my last question is,
Trevor, I'm sorry, Trevor.
We start answering.
Yeah, I'm gonna just cut you off because you literally just like shot 4 or 5 balls out of it once. So we're gonna just, start to answer. So I'll take the first portion of your questions as it relates to education and specifically substance abuse education. If you remember, there was one slide I said, just think about it, 40, 40, 20, right? And so 20% of the taxes collected will go towards drug treatment and education. And so that's where that comes in. It is built into, the MRTA. Additionally, we work closely with sister state agencies. And so we are on regular call with OASIS and other, sister agencies that deal specifically with substance abuse treatment and education of young people. So we are having those discussions. We additionally started as an agency with our public health campaign, and it talked about, how to use, where to use. We have a slew of information on our website in English and Spanish, as well as other languages, that talks about safe using, making sure that you lock your, cannabis to keep children and pets safe. And we continue to develop assets and to develop, curate specific campaigns and materials so that parents are able to have conversations with their young people. So that is actually happening, and it continues to happen. And as we're seeing, revenues from sales come in, it will be even more robust than what it is right now. I don't know if anyone else on the team wanted to add on that.
Oh, no, I was going to go to cash business.
Okay, go on.
Cash business. Housing Works just yesterday installed their debit payment system. Our dispensaries will have debit payment systems. So they will obviously take cash, but it will not be primarily cash. I think a lot of dispensaries in Massachusetts now are like 70% debit payments, 30% cash. So these will not be flush with cash like the illicit shops are, because they don't have debit payment systems, because they probably can't get banking services like our legal dispensaries will. Yeah.
And I wanted to also, as you were talking about the businesses in your community and the security and the illicit shops, I think it's really important for us to be clear that the businesses in your community operating right now are not licensed, right? I don't want us to start talking about them as if, they are one and the same. They are not. And so they don't have a security plan, clearly. And that is an important distinction. But I'm sure, Susan can share out the information that we sent yesterday. Our applicants, the licensees, have to have a security plan. That is part of the application process. Additionally, IDs will be checked multiple times before they get to the bud tender at point of sale, so that we can ensure that young people are not, coming in and accessing cannabis from the dispensaries. So all of that is actually part of what we require from our licensees. And so what you're talking about are illicit sales. We would love for you to, and I think Phil put in his remarks, talked about our enforcement. We would love for you to forward that information to us from our enforcement, for us to our enforcement team, so that they can look into it. I will also tell everybody, because we do know that illicit sales are happening, please send the information to us through our enforcement email. The caveat is, and let other people don't get happy when they hear this part. So I'm just, letting you know, we will not be able to give you blow by blow of what's going on with the investigation. It is an investigation. Our investigation team uses investigatory measures, and they don't even share internally with us what's going on, because they don't want to jeopardize the investigation in the case that they're building. But what you're talking about is, it's really out of pocket.
Yeah, I just want to add really quick about the enforcement stuff. And then because we got a lot of questions, we can jump into another one. We this year, it's 2023 already, enforcement is about to kick up a lot. It's a legislative session. There will very likely be legislative, changes to our enforcement capabilities that will, we'll see an end to these gray market shops in due time, within the first quarter of this year. We're going to step up enforcement in a lot of ways that we couldn't do last year legally. And so that's happening as we speak in Albany. So.
Let me just speak.
Phil called it the Al Capone.
Yeah, I just think we should have handled enforcement first. I think that would have been a big way to really go into communities, as opposed to what we're seeing, and only being able to enact enforcement on issues like cigarette tax or the lights are too bright or issues like that. I just wish we had really done that first. But let me follow up, since you're talking about it, because it's my last
I'm
question.
sorry, I'm sorry, Trevor. I just want to address that, because I don't want to leave it kind of lingering out there. So the MRTA provided OCM with oversight of licensed cannabis.
No, I understand that. I'm just talking about.
Okay, but other people may hear your question and think that we really haven't done anything on enforcement when we have. So I don't want to leave that lingering out there. Additionally, we work very closely with as Phil said in his remarks, with the New York City Sheriff's Department, as well as the NYPD. We have a joint task force, and we have been aggressive on enforcement. It is not that we've not done things on enforcement. We have, as you know, New Yorkers are creative. So they get creative, and then we have to, increase our efforts. But we are doing things on enforcement. Phil talked about it in his slide deck. Thank you.
No, I understand that. And I understand what Phil said and the challenges you have with enforcement, because that is very, very clear. And I understand what Phil's saying. But my last question goes to this component about these particular shops. And since they are all illegal, what happens to these shops? Because there are dozens of shops that are illicit. What happens to these shops after these new regulations, depending on the legislation goes into effect?
Well, I can give you an example of, this is a hypothetical scenario that we have talked about all year. Obviously, we may not have the resources to go after, all these hundreds of shops at the same time, but we do have the ability to potentially take your certificate of authority if you are caught hosting these sales on site. And so, we can make it painful for the landlord who is leasing spaces out to knowingly or unknowingly to these operators who are operating illicitly, and that's how we shut them down. I'm not saying that that's what's in the legislation, but that is what's being discussed. It has to have a cost if you're gonna allow these operators to operate these shops that are selling, candy, THC, Delta 9 stuff to young people sometimes, and so the legislation will not arrest anybody. We're not going back to the dark days of locking people up for a plant, but we are going to enforce the law and potentially, punish some landlords for these violations.
Real quick, I do just want to mention in the chat, there is a link to a press release that the governor put out. This is not the beginning and end of a solution for the illicit shops, but the press release is good to review. It does describe how we're putting QR scanning stickers in legal shops, and that people will be able to differentiate between legal and illegal just based on that. And again, this isn't going to stop anything in its tracks, but it's just one small element of many other elements that we are using to crack down on these places and to make sure that they cannot thrive. And if the legislation, goes through with some of the ideas we've been discussing, as Damien said, a person won't be able to sell a can of Coca-Cola in those places or a stick of gum because they won't be able to collect any taxes. And that goes back to the kind of Al Capone aspect of what we're doing here. He was in jail for tax evasion. Tax evasion is going to be a huge element in cracking down on these, whether it's stopping them from being able to take any sales tax and shutting the store down by default, or it's fines that we're going to be putting up that will have substantial weight behind them, unlike what they do at the moment. Yeah. This is going to be a game changer. And as Damien said, in the first quarter of this year, you're going to see a reduction in these illicit stores, assuming that we are able to keep on our timeline and pass this legislation. So you're going to see a change, and it's going to be significant.
All right. I'm going to move on to other members. Thank you, Trevor. There may be some questions that may be asked, repeated questions. So try to limit your questions to questions they have not heard yet. All right. Thank you, Trevor. The next hand I see is David Crane. Go ahead, David.
Oh, wow. Okay. Here we go. Originally, there was some arrangement for recreational dispensaries to operate only in locations provided somehow by I believe it was by the Dormitory Authority. This changed recently, allowing applicants to propose and use their own locations. So when did that change? And can you provide some background, about why?
I mean, that was always in the conversation, and the change probably started to become more formalized when we actually found out who our licensees were, and that's at the mid-November, when we first gave out the first 37, and a lot of those guys came to us and were like, I have a location, I would like to do this, I would like to be over there, I don't want to wait. And so we started that conversation. When they were awarded the licenses, we were actually allowed to start talking to them about that. And so that feedback started to trickle up to DASNY and our team. And that's how things started, the conversation started to shift.
And
We are still leasing locations with that through DASNY though.
And also remember, this is a statewide program. We have in another, this is actually upstate, where there is an individual that owns a CBD business and it, you know, is a licensed, has a license from OCM. And so now what that person is going to do is, just turnkey their CBD business to cannabis instead of having to, get a location from DASNY and things like that. So as Damien said, the people that we've licensed, they've provided feedback. And, one of the good things about being, relatively new as an agency and standing up, we're standing up an agency, we're standing up an industry, is sometimes when you hear feedback, you have to be, particularly from the licensees, you have to be agile. And so, we heard the feedback from them and we were able to incorporate it.
Okay, so I hear that DASNY does still have a role, or is that just like?
Yes,
Absolutely.
they do.
Yeah,
Okay.
they're still leasing locations right now.
Okay, so, all right, that was just kind of a technical point. I actually have another question, which I'm more concerned about. As I understand, the legislation created some sort of a form of amnesty for illicit sales that had occurred prior to when the law passed in March 2021, 2 years ago. And that any applicant with violations after that date would be prevented from obtaining a license. I don't think, Trevor was going into this too, I don't think that that's actually possible for you to do, especially since NYPD did not do any enforcement in the past 2 years.
Yeah.
And I was told something very similar to what Adam has dropped into the chat here. Back last April, we were told at a presentation that the community boards, oh, that's going to be your role. You can tell us where those happen. Well, we can't do that either. Anyway, my real concern here is that unclear rules create bad situations. In this case, people who played by the rules are going to be disadvantaged by people who establish businesses that were illicit. And then they legalize themselves by gaining a license. That is going to happen. I want to say it's very unfortunate, but I also want to know, how are you actually going to enforce this mechanism?
Yeah. So David, I think it's just a slight misreading of that language. So we have the authority to take into consideration if we served you a cease and desist letter, if we know that you were selling illicit cannabis after the MRTA was signed, we can use that information in if you apply for a license in scoring, in evaluation. We can reject your license application based on the fact that we sent you a cease and desist letter. You did not see sales. Here's the evidence of that. So it's not that the NYPD was involved or anyone was summoned or fined. It's that we saw you operating an illicit shop. And so now you can't get a legal license. And we've warned these illicit shops all year for the last year that by operating these shops, by not paying attention to the cease and desist letter, you are jeopardizing your ability to ever operate in the legal industry. And we have hundreds of people on that list. So, and it grows every day.
Okay, I bet there are hundreds in our district. We're like one little square mile.
Yeah.
There are a lot. So, okay, I'm glad you've been doing it. I really hope that you were able to get complete lists, because I would hate for friends of mine who are applying to basically fail to get a license because other people already have them, or to have their business fail because the one around the corner established 2 years ago and everyone knows that one,
Yeah. I would say that too, that Deshita Dawson at the New York City Cannabis Czar, she's also spearheading an effort to start identifying these locations, because the city has a lot of resources to identify them quickly. They're working with community boards. They're populating a list as well. They're talking to these gray market stores, giving them the chance to stop operating, or they'll be back with a letter. So there will be multiple interactions. We have a lot more people now working on this, identifying these shops. And so we do hope to catch a lot of those folks who refuse to close the doors of their illicit shops. But yes, your feedback is definitely appreciated.
Damien, that's also something that you guys can put in your the community board can put in their feedback to us at OCM when the people come before you. Go on. I'm sorry.
Yeah, David, just to clarify too, as Pascal had in her PowerPoint, we have essentially two licensing systems. One is the MRTA with those 9 licenses, and the other one, a completely different path, is through the conditional system. What you're describing is the conditional adult use retail dispensary. That has 150 individual people that need to meet the criteria of a past conviction plus a successful business ownership after the conviction. So there's really 2 filtration systems that we have there. Again, that applies to 150 people and possibly up to 25 not-for-profit. So 175 people or entities will go through that process that you're describing, that filtration process. When you shift to the MRTA licenses, that's not going to be one of the requirements we have for an MRTA license. So when you look at the conditional retail dispensary, that's 175 entities total. When you look at the MRTA that does not have that requirement, you're talking about possibly thousands of dispensaries statewide. So I do want to emphasize the number is very, very different for what you're describing. You're describing what applies to essentially 150 people versus thousands of licenses under the MRTA. So we certainly understand what you're saying, but I think Damien kind of clarified a few things, and I just wanted to drive home that this isn't the foundation of the cannabis ecosystem we're creating. It's one element, and we're trying to identify people that were disproportionately impacted by the war on drugs.
Yeah, and I
give them
think
an
I may
opportunity.
have confused the issue when I mentioned amnesty in some sense. This is not what I was referring to.
Yeah, I think it's a
I
little
think
different.
that Dania did understand what I meant. I really do mean, you may have a clean record, but if you opened up sometime. in
Yeah.
2021, Right.
Yeah.
Okay, I do want to move on with other speakers. Thank you, David. Next person I see is Daniel Tanow.
Thanks. And this is almost the same question as David, and but not exactly. It's more like, since you said that we should put that, as I'm a community board member, and in our recommendations or recommendations against a license, what access to data would we have about these current gray market illicit sellers? When would we be able to present to you? Like, would we have access to enforcement actions against them? Or, because you also said that there's gray areas in what information you even have yourselves.
Yeah.
So
I don't want to. I see that borderlines are going to enter vigilante territory there. I think the individuals I'm referring to are the ones that received cease and desist letters from our office. That's all we can really use. We can't use, I saw these guys operating illicitly, you shouldn't give them a license. That's not sufficient, I think. So it's just the ones that we've identified, that we've talked to, that we've given a cease and desist letter, they have not stopped. Those are the ones that will be prevented from, receiving a license.
will we have access to that information when we're giving our recommendations?
That got foiled recently. A list of people saw like the first 100 cease and desist letters we sent out, and it revealed addresses of those locations. And we, realized that that's a public safety concern. So, yeah, I don't know.
I think the best solution with that is if you guys send in a complaint about an illicit operator. In your feedback, you can just put, if the person coming before you is an illicit operator, you can put on such and such a date, we submitted information on, illicit operations at this location.
I mean, really, like, send us emails
that.
identifying these locations so we can send enforcement people out there to also identify them and put them into our system.
Okay, thank you, Daniel. I'm going to move on to Damaris Reyes.
Hi, can you hear me? Hi, good evening. Thank you for your presentation and for being so patient with all of our questions. So I have a couple questions and I'll try to be really quick. From what I'm gathering is that you want our feedback about, how the application for licenses should be administered, I at least from the community board's perspective, to inform the proposed legislative process that is happening. Is that correct?
This is a recommendation, an opinion of the community board to reject or accept the proposed license that is in front of the community. So the Cannabis Control Board will read your letter and read why you think this licensee should be given a license or why they shouldn't be given a license, and they will take that into consideration, and it will be made public record.
But the reason and the point of today's discussion and information is also to inform us that there are measures at the state to pass legislation to clarify a lot of the gray areas and concerns around licensing.
Yeah, that's happening now in Albany.
That's happening now.
Yeah.
So with that being said, I guess I have a question about enforcement and what you see in the legislation around enforcement. There are a lot of illegal shops, clearly, and there are a lot of people who work in those shops, like local young people, etc. And, I've already heard you say that, you're not necessarily looking to arrest folks or for the legislation to have enforcement over shops that will result in arrests. So is it safe to say that that is not the goal here, but more so to identify the illegal or a process of the legislation? It would also be to identify the illegal operators so that then those issues can be weighed in on future applications, but not necessarily to enforce any sort of punitive measures on the people who work there, et cetera, because that would defeat the point in some ways, right? Of this entire legislation.
Absolutely. And I want to be clear, Chris Alexander comes from Drug Policy Alliance. He's a criminal justice activist. A lot of the people in charge of the agency come from criminal justice reform. They fought prohibition to get people out of prison. And so that's why, when we're talking about enforcement, we're talking about taking product, seizing product, illicit product, because it's unsafe, it's untested. Some of it has marketing that's friendly to children. We're also talking about closing the stores. We're just locking your door so you can't actually open it up again, and fines, and potentially taking the certificate of authority of that property. So the punitive things we're talking about here are not arrests. They are disincentivizing the operation of these illicit markets. Our legal licensees will not be successful if there's a shop right down the street that doesn't pay any taxes, that's selling product for half the price to anyone who will walk in the front door. So there have to be repercussions for operating these shops if we're going to ever have a legal industry in New York. I don't want us to be California, which is, it's been a nightmare for years over there. And so, we're trying to be as non-punitive as possible here. But there are people taking advantage of the situation in ways that I think are borderline criminal. We've gone to shops and told them, stop selling this stuff, stop marketing something called Skittles that has THC in it that looks like a bag of Skittles, and the next day they're there selling it again. And that's a problem.
Yeah, no, that's helpful to understand, because I think, just like liquor licenses or the illegal sale of tobacco, illegal sale of alcohol, is problematic. The illegal sale of marijuana falls to me under the same category. But my next quick question is a two-parter. So the first is really simple, do you have any sense of how many licenses New York State is looking to issue overall throughout the entire state? And then the second part of that question is around the community board or residents' ability to weigh in on these establishments for two reasons. One would be, we want to make sure that we are, in this neighborhood, for example, for many years, there's been a lot of issues around the proliferation of, liquor license establishments. Right. Yeah. So I think what people are reacting to also is that everywhere you turn, there is a new weed shop that is opening up. Literally, I just saw another one open up the other day. Right. Yeah. And so what that means is that all those spaces and the retail diversity in this community is going to be impacted. So we may be winning on one hand, but not on the other. So, right. So the point I'm asking, or the real question I'm asking is how many licenses, and then what will the community board or the community's role be in, monitoring how many, because I see two problems with that. One is, if there's a very organized community, and we've seen this, where there's some communities where nothing in my backyard, they want nothing in their backyard, and everything gets pushed to other communities. So we want to make sure that every community, is equally absorbing this.
Absolutely.
And that it's not just low-income communities where there's vulnerable populations that we're going to have a weed shop or 3 weed shops on every block. By the same token, we want to make sure, that that community board members and other folks cannot just, like you said, operate under some sort of vigilante process and say, no, we don't want these shops here, when it, when that could be an establishment that's deserving of a license.
Yeah, let me hit
So
that.
that was, I was a two-parter, but I know it's a lot to unpack.
So a lot of states determine how many licenses, how many retail licenses they're going to give out based on population. So like Colorado, ton of dispensaries, one for every 10,000, 20,000 residents of Colorado. It's a lot of dispensaries. Massachusetts is maybe one in every 50,000. I think we'll find a nice equilibrium at one every 40,000, 25, 30,000. That could look like 800 dispensaries across the 5 boroughs. And they're not going to be there's not going to be 2 on each block, because they have the 500-foot limit from each other. It might be bigger than that.
It's 1,000.
1,000 feet. Yeah. So it's a 1,000-foot limit. You can't have 2 next to each other. The ones that you're seeing that are all over your neighborhood are illegal. They're not operating by any rules. And that's why they're starting to cluster. And so, they'll be spread out very evenly. No communities, every community has the same privileges at sending a recommendation for denial or, acceptance of a license. There isn't going to be a community that is more effective at pushing licenses out of their neighborhood than another. Everyone will have the same, opportunity to influence the process. And so we won't see that concentration of liquor stores. I mean, I'm from Southeast DC. I saw it happen in DC. You're not going to see that stuff happen in low-income neighborhoods in New York.
All right, thank you. I mean, I would say this would be our feedback around this would be good to give in terms of any ideas that we have around how to monitor this moving forward in the future, to ensure that, like, Park Avenue cannot say no to any licenses, and Pitt Street on the Lower East Side has to absorb one on every block.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the community board meeting on the Upper East Side.
Yeah, thank you.
And actually, just to be really clear, if someone were to say no, again, that would be their recommendation, and it would play a role in whether or not the Cannabis Control Board move forward with issuing a license. So even a no from a community board is an opinion that we will take into account when determining. So we will have some leeway in that regards.
Yeah, I mean, my last point would just be that it would be helpful to have a process every few years or so to sort of monitor the distribution of these licenses, to effectively see
not a bad idea.
If any communities have been able to limit it and other communities have more.
Yeah, I mean, I got to be honest. The lower Manhattan is going to be very popular for dispensaries because of the foot traffic, because of the younger population, because of the higher income. So yeah, but we have to monitor that. It's a really good idea. I think we can take that feedback back.
And you know what, Damaris? That sounds like something for public comment.
Yeah, I know. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Damaris.
Thank you.
Next person is Arnett Scott.
Hello, and I think you I think you have like a stream of consciousness, because I'm almost going to like piggyback off Damaris. So, but I'm gonna take a question or two out because it was pretty much answered. Thank you guys for sharing your presentation. Thank you for coming to our to address the community and our community board. I have a couple of questions, and it's basically, I'm gonna try to break them down because a lot of it was answered. Okay. will there be a liaison for the community board from your office so that we can streamline questioning and clarity when needed? That's one question.
So I will let you know that Susan and Paul are our best friends. Phil and I we talk to them constantly. They have our email. I've seen Paul with his students. So, you know, they already have the bat phone and they know how to use it and they wield it well.
Awesome. Okay. The other thing I'm thinking of New York City having SBA, like the Small Business Association, that help entrepreneurs with their business plans and yada, yada, yada. As this new industry is starting to blossom and there are going to be a lot of questions and not a lot of clarity, will there be some sort of provisional or continuing education for those new entrepreneurs that you're trying to uplift in order to have these licenses? Because if they're new to actually even owning businesses or new to this type of business, and as the legislation changes and there's also having to relate to community boards, would there be some sort of education or continuing education on the back burner for that?
Yes. Short answer, yes. The MRTA mandates that my team develop incubators, develop educational campaigns, workforce development. We have a lot of work to do. It hasn't started yet because we're still in this conditional licensing period, but it'll kick into overdrive towards the end of this year as the tax revenue starts to flow back to our agency. We can actually start spending some money, building some incubators, and training people.
Okay, I have one more, and I think that's it because I'm trying to condense because I got a lot of information already. In one of I can't remember who said it, but in giving, like, let's say we have a licensee coming to a community board and they present how they were going to give back to the community, a CBO or whatever they're going to do. Is that also, because to me it's like sounding like two parts. We have the 40-40-20. In addition to that, the licensee is to also be able to have a component in where they're going to say what they're going to spend back to the community. Meaning, I get the breakdown, like I got that part.
That's just the tax revenue. That's just the taxes.
Right. But with Pascal, I believe broke down to 40% is education, of the 40% something else.
Community grants.
Correct. But also there was an example of a licensee saying when they present to the community board, hey, I'm going to open up this spot. And this is also what I'm giving back to the community. I'm going to be doing X, Y, and Z. So I'm thinking is that, and this is in addition to what we're getting back from the taxes, correct?
Yes, and they submit that plan to us and we score it and evaluate it and award them a license based on the strength of it. So by the time they come to you, they've already got a great community impact plan. Maybe they partnered with a local nonprofit to do something. Maybe they're already connected to the community. We are considering a lot of different strategies for licensing operators so that they might actually come from the communities they want to operate businesses in. We think that dispensaries particularly are very community-facing businesses that deal directly with the community, and there's a lot of education and back and forth there. And we'd like to see those dispensaries owned by people from that community. And so they'll have that requirement to have this impactful plan to benefit the community. And then all the taxes that they pay will go to nonprofit community grants, education, and drug rehabilitation.
Okay, that was it. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Arnett. I think there's two board members I have not got to yet. So Maylee and then Sandra Strother. Maylee, give me a second. There you go.
Hi, I guess, yeah, you can hear me. So I guess my question is a little bit more also about what the community board is supposed to do. And some of it revolves around also location. So, yeah, I mean, you said they should have shown a strong community engagement plan or their future plans for engaging the community, at least, if they're to have this business at a particular location. But also what I think we were talking about is, are they supposed to specific, the Lower East Side is really small, it's not that big, the Community Board 3 is, District 3 is very small. So are they also supposed to come to the community board showing that they've already talked to the neighbors, or is it that the neighbors find out about it at the community board meeting for the first time? I mean, what is expected? And I know there's after they, I suppose there's a timeline too. I don't know what it is, but after they come to community board, there must be some other timeline or something that happens after that for us. So I'm just trying to decide like how we, find out more about how we decide things and whether or not we have more time afterwards, like after they come to the community board. Because some of them people have these great plans, but they haven't talked to any of the neighbors about their wonderful plans, and nobody even knows about them, until they come to community board.
Yeah. We haven't done it yet. I think we're all good. Yeah, there's a lot yet to find out how we're gonna do this, but.
So I would say two things. The community benefit plan, that is not for the conditional adult retail dispensary. That is for the MRTA. So for the people coming before you now, that is not a requirement, right? Now, having talked to neighbors, I think two things on that. One, people, entering the business are doing so as a business, and they want to be successful, and we want them to be successful because their success is really good for, the borough, the city, the state. And so as good business people, the expectation is that they should talk to neighbors, right? Because if you move into a home, you say hello to your neighbors. And so that is the expectation. It is not something that is written anywhere. It is not in the law. It is not in the law for the conditional licenses, but certainly that is an expectation. And then the other thing that I would like to also just kind of point out is, as many of you may know, CB2, your neighboring board, they actually had 2 licensees come before them. And, they made a recommendation to the licensees, like, look, these are some of the people that you may want to talk to when they provided the 30-day notice to the community board. And I do know that Susan has made recommendations to the people coming that will be coming before your board, as well as to like, hey, these are some of the people that you may want to talk to.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you, May. I think I saw Sandra before. Hold on. Sandra, go ahead.
Yes. So my question is about the medicinal dispensaries. Are they separate from retail dispensaries? And the reason why I ask is because I know that pain management doctors are giving out, first they're certifying you at the cost of $250 per year. And then they give you a list of dispensary places that you can go to. Will this now obfuscate the need to get this medical certification when we can now just go to a retailer to purchase?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's a challenge that every legal state with an adult use and a medical industry faces when they bring on adult use afterwards. We are committed to ensuring that our medical cannabis industry thrives and grows. And they actually have, more stringent requirements on testing and product quality. And, their whole operation is governed by a different set of regulations that are specific to medical patients. Some of their products might even be so strong that because they are for people with debilitating issues that they need such a strong dosage for. The adult use operators, they're catering to a recreational audience. The products are going to look a little different. Obviously, it's all weed, but we are committed to ensuring that there's a separation and that our medical industry stays our medical industry for the medical patients in the state.
Thank you. But please, one further comment. Please fix the website. It is it's so convoluted. It's hard to find.
I'm going to tell our web developer you said that.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. I'm just going to run through hands at this point. There's not that many remaining, Gabriel Woodhouse. I'm going to give you permission to speak. Go right ahead.
Yeah, hi. Thanks so much for the presentation. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah, great. Yeah, my name is Gabriel Woodhouse. I'm actually a program director for a substance use treatment program in CB3 that's located very close to a site on 3rd Street. So we have some questions. I'm joined here by some colleagues, and we each have a couple of questions that are kind of connected. So I think you may have just answered this question, but what level of engagement with the surrounding community does the OCM encourage or require of proposed dispensaries that want to site somewhere? Like, what is there a requirement or?
There's no requirement, but we are going to develop a program to teach them about, community liaisoning, community outreach. I'll repeat, the CB2 applicants that they just got are legacy nonprofits that have been in the city for decades. They have a lot of relationships in those communities. They sent their community liaison. They were able to do all these things that maybe some of our licensees might not have access to those resources. But we are going to prepare them to really be, transparent and thoughtful partners in the communities they operate in. But we won't have any requirements upon them.
Okay, thanks. That's helpful. And then the second question I have is, if a location is found to be detrimental to a community or population within the community, what is the recourse, if any?
So our regs, a great place to start looking at this is how, Pascal, correct me if I'm wrong, it's called community, what is it called? Community, you guys don't know? It's like a community facility. They're neighborhoods.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Go on, Phil. Sorry.
Yeah, Phil, sorry, you want to jump in?
I mean, there's an element in the proposed regulations. There is a community facility part, and that has some essentially recommendations that allows a municipality to increase the number of entities that an individual would not be able to put a dispensary next to, essentially. Right now, and this goes a little bit into community engagement and at least some guideposts. It's 200 feet from a house of worship. It's 500 feet from a school. We took that concept and we put it into the community facilities part of the proposed regulations. And again, it would allow a community to maybe identify a park that is geared towards children, or maybe a pool house, things like that, where a community could say, we're going to put some zoning around these community facilities so that a dispensary is not directly on top of these places. There's a lot of leeway in that language. And again, to emphasize, these are the proposed regulations. So we don't know what these will look like after the 60-day comment ends and after the 45-day comment kicks in. But it does give more power for a municipality to zone certain entities out from having a dispensary right near them. Again, since these are proposed, I can't say specifically what the final list is going to look like, but we have given communities a little bit more breathing room to address issues that they feel are important. I think that kind of summarizes that aspect of the proposed regulations.
And just as a reminder, in New York City, that authority is with the city council.
I apologize, guys. I got to go walk my dog. Got to get back to my apartment, or he's going to pee all over the floor. But I appreciate you. Thank you for the time tonight. I will leave you in the good hands of Pascal, Philip, and Adam. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Damien.
Thank you, Damien, for coming on. All right. I understand we're running up against the clock now. It is 8:17. So I see 4 more hands, and that will be it. I will not take any more hands after that. I see Damara Walker or Walser. I'm sorry if I'm screwing that up. Damara.
Good evening, everyone, and Happy New Year. I'm actually the program director of a shelter located on the Lower East Side through Project Renewal, 83rd Street Shelter. I actually just had two questions. Why does OMC not have regulations for distance requirements from substance use programs? And will that be part of the next round of rulemaking within the next legislative session?
So I think as it relates to the next round, the legislation is really looking at enforcement and cleaning up some language in the MRTA and not necessarily something like this. But Damara, I'm going to be a broken record. This is a good opportunity for public comment, right? And so that's what that process is for. So please, if you guys can put that feedback in public comment, I think that would be very helpful. And the first part of your question, I'm sorry, can you just remind me? What was the first part?
Why does OMC not have regulations for distance requirements from substance abuse programs?
Okay, so that was not initially in the MRTA. That was not in the law. In the law specifically did requirements for houses of worship and for schools. So those were the two pieces in there. And so if we were to add anything, again, I think the public comment period, engaging in that and putting that recommendation in there, I think would be helpful. And the next thing I'm going to say, some people may find controversial, and I am not trying to be controversial at 8:19, but I will say that we've also, there's a lot of research out there, and the research, I think, the studies don't definitively kind of say if this is a positive or a negative. I think it's very mixed. And so, there's that other piece of it as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I'm just going through Matt Vigiano. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly.
Can you hear me now?
Go right ahead.
We're pretty close. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you to the Office of Cannabis Management. Quick question is, if the presentation, Pascal, that you and the team ran through earlier is available to be downloaded so that so the public can kind of digest all of that information, that would be really great. Maybe it's something that you can provide to the community board to post on the website.
Matt, I'll answer that question. This is going to be put on our YouTube channel tomorrow morning. So this is being recorded to be put on our YouTube channel. Yep.
Even me asking that question. Okay, super.
Yep.
We'll get you the a copy of the PowerPoint. We can send it over to Paul, and
yeah, I'll include the PowerPoint and as well as the information I've been including in the chat, but that will probably come tomorrow, and it's also recorded. So,
great. Thank you, everybody.
Can I ask you to send that to the office?
Yes, Susan, that's what we do. We send it. So we'll send it to you and Paul. And we always send, as Phil said, the PowerPoint and I'm sorry, and Adam as well. So we send the PowerPoint and then we send all the links as well, because we know sometimes trying to grab the links and listen and look at the PowerPoint, it's a lot. So we typically send that email like the next day. The longest it would be like is 2 days, but yeah.
Susan has had her hand up, so go ahead, Susan.
Thank you. I just wanted from some of the questions to maybe ask for some clarifications or make some clarifications. First of all, when the subject came up of the dormitory authority, I just wanted to clarify that the nonprofits that are coming to us now aren't under that, the dormitory authority. They're finding their own locations. So the applications we're hearing now are different. And also the community board is going to be voting on two different things. One is the individual application, and the other is recommendations for the draft proposals. And then I just wanted to say on the retail aspect, at the beginning, I also thought, well, this is retail, it's like a retail liquor store. But then I realized it's actually very different, because when you buy from a retail liquor store, you must take that product home. You can't drink it outside. You can't take it to the park, which is very different than cannabis, where you know, the street is a place for smoking, or right outside the dispensary will be a place for smoking. So it's neither good nor bad, but different. So I just wanted to clarify those things. That's it. I'm done.
Okay, I see one final hand. Damaris, I don't know if that is your hand up from before, but you can go back and talk if.
Yeah,
if you
no,
have a
yeah,
question.
no, it's me. It's quick. First,
Okay.
Adam, let me tell you that you remind me of my former staff person who left me in August to go to law school in Chicago. His name was Daniel. He was magnificent. It seems like you're pretty magnificent in your office too.
Adam is magnificent.
Yes. Second, that was a good point, Susan, about the, having to take the cannabis or being able to, because mostly people will smoke it outside, especially because there are a lot of rules and regulations about smoking indoors now and in your own apartment. So most people will consume it. Smoke it outside. But I have a different question. So regarding the tax dollars, 40% is going to be used for towards the reinvestment grant fund portion, right? Which is, covering many things, job creation and all kinds of stuff. But it's not clear if any of that revenue will also be used to provide grants to startups because if the idea is to also think about like what the negative impacts have been to certain communities, right? And then there's also an issuance of a certain amount of licenses to some of those impacted folks. I guess the question is, will the state, through this taxation money, provide resources to help some of those businesses get off the ground, including nonprofit organizations? And if not, can you speak to any other plans that you may know of that I may not know, or that may have been discussed, where startup businesses or individuals who want to start a license or get a license, or nonprofits like Housing Works who want to also open up a shop as a way to generate revenue, create jobs, towards their mission, if there will be any funds that will be available for those purposes.
So the grants that will come from the fund, actually the Cannabis Advisory Board, they will make determinations on who the grants should be made out to. And so there'll be, I'm almost certain that there'll be some kind of job training things and other grants to nonprofits in the areas disproportionately impacted by prohibition. The governor provided monies for the fund that is helping with the work that DASNY is doing. And she put 200, right, Phil? I can't remember the.
I'm sorry, the money?
Yeah, how much money? Did the state put
It's
in?
the goal is to have 200 million in the fund. However, the state put up 50 million to start
Okay.
with.
So the state put it 50 million, thank you, to start with that. And that is helping the individuals that receive the conditional adult retail dispensary license. And I know that the city through SBS, because the Dashida Dawson that Damien spoke of earlier. She is the founding director for Cannabis NYC. Cannabis NYC is housed in New York City Small Business Services. I know that New York City has programs to assist entrepreneurs, and they're looking for ways that they can provide even more assistance. So my recommendation would be that people go to SBS. There are a plethora of programs there to help budding entrepreneurs develop their business plans. They have business centers. Additionally, we are working with the Department of Labor, and this is more on the workforce development to really help prepare this workforce for this budding industry. And these will be good paying jobs. There's labor project agreements. These will be unionized jobs. And so for those people who may not want to be owners, but are looking for, a really good paying job with benefits and can help themselves and their families, certainly this will be an avenue. But I can't speak directly to will there be grants for people, startup grants for people or nonprofits. We just don't have that information at this time.
Right. Pascal, if I may just say one final thing, which is that as you all continue to do this work and you learn more about what might be potentially available to do the city and the state, that on the state's website, maybe there'd be some, guidance or links that inquiring entrepreneurs who may be interested and are looking at this, as a license, as a way to make, a living, etc., that they can, at least have a starting point. So I know it's not necessarily your job, but if you're going to already talk about grants, people will probably assume that maybe there are grants available for startup. So maybe we can, over time include information that you may have available to give that guidance to the general public.
So I will say, thank you for that feedback. We would have information on state products that that we're curating, but we wouldn't necessarily have links to municipalities. And that's just because, right here tonight, we're talking to New York City, right, but the three of us literally talk to municipalities across the state. Right, and there are just so many municipalities.
I have to remember that New York is not the end all be all.
That, it would just be prohibitive on our website. It might even crash our website, to be very honest. That's how many, links that would be on there. But I would suggest that two things. One, you sign up for information from SBS, get on their mailing list, and also sign up for information from our office, because people will tell you, they have the latest information on what OCM is doing or what we're offering. Really, we have the best information on what we're doing, what we're offering. So sign up for our email alerts and you'll be able to, to get information that way as well.
Thank you. Thank you for the job that you're doing.
Yeah, and real quick, just to emphasize Pascal's point, I'm throwing in the chat a link to an aspect of our website that brings you directly to the advisory board meetings. And if we're going to see, the advisory board is one of two of our boards that we have, and they will be the ones determining, as Pascal said, that where that 40% money goes to and how it's used in disproportionately impacted communities. And there's a very good chance they may be involved if we do come out with any future grants or anything, funding streams. They would be involved. It would probably be a good place to check from time to time, because they may again be involved in that discussion of additional grants. And that's actually an easy part of the website to find, by the way. It's one of the few easy ones to come across, but the link's in the chat. So that's probably going to be one aspect of OCM that weighs into what you're discussing here with the grants.
And also, Damaris, I'm gonna say it again.
Yes.
This sounds like a good opportunity for public comment.
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
We'll work on it. We'll work on it. Thank you.
All right, our pleasure.
All right, thank you, Damaris. Okay, so that is it in terms of questions. I want to thank OCM for coming on tonight and doing this presentation, brand spanking at the beginning of 2023. Thank you. I know we've been in a lot of communication over the past month or so, all the way to the point that you do get to see my students when we're able to jump on the call and they're knocking down my door. But I'm grateful and appreciative that you've been as transparent as possible throughout this process and helping us figure this out. And this is where I'll pivot to. Next Wednesday, January 11th, will be the task force first and right now only meeting for a while regarding an application that is on our website on the agenda with all resources available to us, and whatever documents have already been submitted to the board are already posted onto the website. That meeting is next week. Also, registration is required unless you're on the task force. You're already a panelist, so you should have received that link as well. So I know a lot of people who are on this forum here tonight will probably be on next week, and that's where we'll give our comments on a potential application, on a potential licensee, a card applicant, more specifically, for next week. And in terms of comments, we will be submitting comments as a board and voting on it at full board at the end of January. All right, so I want to say thank you to OCM for coming on tonight, and thank you to all the board members and members of the public who came on tonight. This video will be on YouTube tomorrow, some point within the 24-hour period.
Get to be famous.
Have
a good night.
Don't forget to like and
Thank you, everyone, and have a good night.
Yes, thank you. Good night.